Hello, viewers, and welcome back. Today, we welcome author Emily Barth Isler, who loves writing for kids. She wants kids to grow up in a world that is kinder, more inclusive, and representative of what life really looks like. Her middle grade novel, The Color of Sound, debuts in just 2 days, March 5th. Yay!
Got my copy here.
Oh,
Yes.
that's beautiful.
Thanks.
You want to talk a little bit about your book?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you all so much for having me. I am a fan and just so excited to get to do this. And, any chance I get to talk to book lovers and for an audience of people that includes, all the different kinds of book lovers, teachers, librarians, students, all of that is just, it's such a thrill. Like that's why I love doing this. So I want to show you the full cover because it's really
So
cool
pretty.
how it wraps around. This is the back, but you've got like the two main characters looking at each other, and it's so beautiful. The cover,
It is.
the inside is nice too, but I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with how the cover came out. So the Color of Sound is about main character Rosie, who is this of the two girls. Who is a 12-year-old violin prodigy who has synesthesia, which we'll talk about in a second. If people don't know, don't worry. And she decides she's going on strike from the violin. She is tired of it being her entire life. She doesn't do anything else. She has no other activities, very few friends. It's really her entire life. And so we don't know at the beginning sort of why, but for some reason she's like, I'm done. I need a break. Indefinite break. And since she's not going to her special music camp for the summer that she usually goes to for other music prodigies and her, she instead has to hang out with her mom, who's going to visit her parents, Rosie's grandparents. And Rosie's grandmother has had Alzheimer's for a long time. She's dying. Rosie's like barely known her because she has been losing her memory for most of Rosie's life. So Rosie goes with her mom to Connecticut, where her grandparents are. It's her mom's childhood home. And while she's there, she sort of stumbles onto this shed. And in the shed, she meets a young girl who, it turns out, this girl, who it turns out is her mom as a 12-year-old. So there's sort of a little magic time travel thing going on. And through that experience and a bunch of other things that I don't want to spoil, Rosie ends up understanding so much more about her mom and her grandparents, her family in general, sort of why the violin is so important to her mom, why music is so important, and just a bunch of other things about her family story that she didn't understand. And so it's kind of the idea of getting the context of who you are as a bigger picture in relation to your family, while also the differentiation that kids go through when they're tweens, which is a really normal part of growing up, of saying, hey, I think I want to be this kind of person, or do this activity, or live this way. It's sort of the beginning of that separation process for kids. And so for Rosie, it's sort of a dual process of learning more about where she comes from, but also figuring out where she wants to go and what she really wants.
Perfectly said.
Well, thanks.
No. I'm so excited to read it. So you've had quite a few amazing KidLit authors, such as John Cho, Barbara D., and Ellie Swartz, to name a few, give praise for your book. Joanne Levy, author of Sorry for Your Loss, describes it as a heartwarming tale linking generations, music, Jewish culture, and the myriad of challenges faced by tweens today, and goes on to say it's the perfect summer read. How does that make you feel?
I mean, so honored, so excited. We sent copies of the book really early to a bunch of authors, and it was basically like making a dream list and assuming that one or two of them might actually read the book. And almost all the people I asked to read it did, and then said such nice things about it. And it's so lovely. This is my second book, but my first book came out during the pandemic, and so sorry. My first book came out during the pandemic, and I haven't had as much a chance as I think I would have, or certainly as I would have liked, to meet a lot of authors and to connect with people. And, past couple of years have been isolating and strange. And so this was a really cool way to kind of connect with some authors. John Cho is sort of the exception to that, in that I was on a panel with him at the LA Times Festival of Books in 2022. We both had debut books come out in 2021, and we were doing a panel there, and I was so in awe of his first book is called Troublemaker, and it's so good, and it was such a fun read. And actually I listened to the audiobook because he reads the audiobook, so it was like a double treat.
That's cool.
But anyway, in summary, it's all just like it's dreamy to have other authors read your work and not just like it, but get it and understand it. And I think the thing we all want in life in general is to be seen, which is like so much a part of The Color of Sound, of Rosie, the main character, wanting to be seen for who she is and not just what she can do or what she has to offer the world, but like just being who she is. And so for me, getting those lovely comments from authors makes me feel really seen. And I guess we never grow out of wanting that and needing to be seen. And I was just so like the quote you read was so nice because it sums up a lot of the really important stuff. And when you're writing and you're like throwing things in a mixing bowl and like hoping that it turns out as like a cake or whatever you're trying to make, but you don't know until you bake it. And so it's really nice to hear that somebody recognizes all the ingredients but also appreciates sort of the cohesive end result.
So true. Speaking of, I received a NetGalley copy of your book, The Color of Sound, and absolutely loved it.
Thank
I really
you.
enjoyed like the mixture of realness with some mystery, how you weaved in family history and traditions, the dynamics of Rosie and her parents, the very strong feelings of her feeling like they didn't understand her fully. But then on the flip side, like, I'm a parent, so I get this side too, is she didn't always think about or understand her parents' perspective either.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know, it was just really, really cool how you just threw it all together and made the most amazing cake, if that's what you're going for.
Thank you. That's so nice.
And something I highlighted something that you wrote in your author's note. And you said, there is no one way to be, no one way to experience the world. You should never have to be afraid to share what makes you different, because I promise it makes you the strongest and best version of yourself. And no matter what, you are enough. And every time I read that, I just feel this sense of peace, but also like empowerment. And your thoughts really shine through in your book. So
thank
you
you.
for
That means a lot. And it's certainly, it's such a unique moment in my life to be writing middle grade fiction because I am a parent. I have 2 kids who are tweens. And also I am a daughter. My parents are alive and well. And, I'm still very much in that middle sandwich generation or whatever we want to call it. And so getting to write this as I'm living it, of trying to understand where people are coming from, but also trying to give my perspective. It was a sort of a beautiful gift. It allowed me to really look and try and examine what matters and who I want to be as both a mother and a daughter, and who I want my kids to get the opportunity to be, or, so in some ways this book was, I hate to say it was like a selfish book, but it was a really beautiful experience for me, in addition to, I hope, helping other people. And I also hope that people who read this, even if they're not wrestling with this exact recipe of this cake we're talking about, or whatever metaphor we want to use, if the kids are not musical prodigies, or if their family isn't Jewish, or they don't have family secrets that they're uncovering, or whatever those things, I hope that some of it can be used sort of like a metaphor in any way that we are different, and really looking at the push and pull in the tween years of wanting to fit in, but also really wanting to stand out and trying to figure out when to do both of those things. And I found that parallel between being Jewish and being, having synesthesia or being a musical prodigy or whatever, that ended up being such a nice complementary theme that wove together really beautifully that I didn't even anticipate. And I don't want to I don't want to spoil the story. So I won't get into the specifics, but I was surprised at how much of both of those things involve sometimes needing to hide and sometimes wanting to stand out. And I just feel really lucky it came together so nicely.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you described middle school perfectly. Like
Oh,
that's
thank
what I
you.
teach, and that's why I teach them too, because it is such the whole thing is a push and pull. It's just your emotions
Yeah.
are just all over.
And
And
middle school was my favorite time in school, and I know
yeah.
I'm probably in the minority for that, or certainly
Mhm.
from the people I've talked to over the course of my life, I'm definitely in the minority. Um, I just thought it was magical and awesome, and like you're getting to figure out who you are. And it
Mhm.
was like my best 3 years of school, of K
Oh,
through 12
yeah.
years. So thank you for teaching that age. Like people need teachers who are willing to put up with all of the things that
I
come with
love
that push
them.
and pull. It's like
Yeah.
definitely a very dramatic time where there's like a lot of feelings and stuff, but it was my favorite time.
Yeah, and it's pivotal, I think. I think
Yeah.
it's very important. It's a
Yeah.
Mhm.
big time. So, I'm very interested in this. The main character, 12-year-old Rosie, has synesthesia, and
Mhm.
you also have that,
Yes.
which allows Rosie and you to see music and colors. Can you tell our viewers about this and how it affects both your life and Rosie's life in the book?
Yes. So Rosie can see colors in music and hear music and colors. I have a slightly different form of synesthesia. I actually have a couple different forms of it, as does Rosie. So there are about 80 forms of synesthesia that people know of right now. And it can range in all sorts of experience. Like, I don't have this, but there is a form I've been learning about called mirror touch synesthesia, where somebody will see another person in pain and they feel the pain. So
Mm.
synesthesia, as sort of an umbrella, is a neurological, neurodivergent um, feature. It's not a disability. It's not a disease. It's very hard to sort of categorize, but it is when one of your senses becomes intermingled with another one. So in the example I just
Hmm.
gave of mirror touch synesthesia, you're seeing something, so it's your visual sense, but then you're feeling it as well. So it's like
Mhm.
a bonus sensory experience. And so the kind of synesthesia that I have, there's a couple kinds, and to the point where I didn't realize for most of my life until recently that I had synesthesia, because first of all, I didn't know what it was because there aren't a ton of books about it. And also, we each only get one brain, we get one experience. We don't get to go into somebody else's brain and spend a
Right.
day and see what that's like. Although it reminds me of that really great David Levithan book, I think called
Mhm.
One Day,
Mhm.
um, which is about going into other people's brains and seeing their life, or like, anyway,
Oh.
that was a sidebar, but that's a great book. Anyway, um, we only get one opportunity to experience the world through our perception. And I mean, what a beautiful metaphor for empathy, because it's sort
Mm.
of the idea of like we assume that everybody is seeing the same thing or experiencing the same thing, and it's a beautiful reminder to kind of zoom out and be like, not everybody is having the same experience right now.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel the same to everybody. It doesn't look the same to everybody. It doesn't sound the same. Like, we are all having a different sensory experience, even if we're in the same room.
Mm.
So I decided I really wanted to write about it. And because I think it's such a gorgeous metaphor for empathy, or not even a metaphor, it's just like, it is empathy. It's literally like how to feel what other people are feeling, or how to appreciate
Yeah.
what they're feeling, even if you can't feel it. And so I purposefully gave Rosie a different kind of synesthesia than what I have, because I didn't want to write about myself and my own experience. And I think the kind of synesthesia that she has that I wrote about lends better to the particular story. But it's such a subjective thing too. It's, I'm in a Facebook, I'm actually in a couple synesthesia Facebook groups that I didn't join until after I had finished and finalized the book, because I really didn't want to borrow anyone else's story or their experience. I did a lot of research, and I didn't figure out that I had synesthesia until my 30s, I think. I was in therapy because I also have OCD, which is another neurodivergent. It's an umbrella, and so you've got all of these conditions under this umbrella that just mean your brain works differently than the quote unquote typical brain. Although we're learning
Mhm.
that, of course, like there is no typical brain. Like technically everyone's brain is different. So we need some new language. But
Yes.
so I was in therapy and I was talking about something and describing, the way that numbers and letters are organized and colors and music and stuff. And my therapist was just like, oh, wow. So that's not how everybody experiences things. And it had never occurred to me that the way I experienced the world was not the way everyone experienced the world. So it's so eye-opening to me. And it took me like probably almost another decade to figure out how to write about it, because it's like there are so many parts of our perceptions that are very hard to describe. And that's why books are so important, because every time you read a book, you're getting a little peek into the author's brain and their experience and the way that they see the world. So it took me a while to figure out how to, sort of like cover this topic. And I hope I'll get to write more books, not necessarily about synesthesia, but definitely about the concept of like how we perceive the world and how the way we assume other people are, and that kind of, it's an endless mine of fascinating topics, I think. But it was really exciting. And, I think about what my life might have been like had I read a book like this when I was 12 and figured out that like, oh, the way my brain works is like maybe not the same as everybody's. And maybe that's why certain things are harder for me, but other things are easy for me, and just known myself better. And I hope that someone reading this book, even if they don't have synesthesia, is able to sort of take it to that next step and say like, oh, the ways that I'm different are like, they can be really cool. They can be really hard. I have to recognize and celebrate every part of it and talk to a grown-up who can help me figure out what to do with it. All of those things that I hope kids take away from the book.
Yeah. So, what kind of music do you think Rosie would be listening to right now?
I love this question. I had so much fun thinking about it. So I don't want to give away any spoilers, but I will say at the beginning of the book, Rosie exclusively listens to classical music because that's been her entire world for 12 years. And it's literally the only thing she thinks about. And through the course of the book, obviously, as you can imagine, she goes through lots of changes and learns lots of new things. So I would like to assume that now, after the story has been told, she has opened her world to a lot of new things. And so I'd like to think that she and her best friend, Julianne, are Swifties. I'd like to think they went to the Eras tour. I didn't, but they're cooler than I am. I'd like to think that, that she's into Olivia Rodrigo and other popular music that's so cool that I don't even know about it. I'd like to think that also that Rosie's done like a deep dive and discovered the Beatles and, 80s and 90s music. My husband and I are always playing music for our kids from our youth and talking about like what we remember. And music is just so evocative. Like it brings back memories if you've heard it before, or it brings up images if you haven't. And I'd like to think that Rosie right now is just like surveying all music. I hope she's into like musical theater, which is all I was into as a kid, country music, which I was raised on, everything, a little bit of everything.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Do you play any music like Rosie does?
It's a complicated question because at the moment I don't really, which is part of why I wanted to write this book, because music was such a big part of my life from the time I was 5 until I was about 30. I was a professional actor / singer. And I was always in a musical, or I was in a couple different professional kid choirs where we'd travel, and you see like a kids chorus with a symphony, or like a kids choir on I don't know, whatever, like we would travel and perform all places. And I was in like a show choir that traveled all over the place and a bunch of plays. And then when I decided I didn't want to be a performer anymore, the music part of my life stopped too. I also, as a kid, I played the viola and I played the harp. And I took some piano lessons sort of as a foundation. So I was always very immersed in music, not in the hyper-focused way that Rosie is, but certainly to an unusual degree and from a very early age. And so music was a huge part of my life. And even though I don't want to be a performer anymore and I don't miss it and I don't have an interest in doing that, it did also kind of stop the music part. And in the past year or two, both of my children have started playing musical instruments, and it has been so exciting to invite music back into our life in that way.
Yeah.
Obviously we listen to music all the time at home, and I listen in the car. I love to sing in the car when I'm by myself. It's like my greatest joy. So, I guess in that way I'm still practicing music, but music is super important to me. And so writing this book gave me an opportunity to really get immersed in it again. And it was such a joy. And now through my kids, I have that. And I miss singing. I miss harmonizing. So I do that in the car when I'm by myself. And
we're going to cut to the clip of you in the car singing and harmonizing right now. I'm just kidding. That would be cool.
Oh my gosh, that would be, I don't know, embarrassing.
Kind of creepy, but how did you get this camera in my car?
No, but that was like, we moved from New York City to Los Angeles a couple years ago, 4 years ago. And one of my favorite things about getting a car was I was like, oh, I'm going to just like sing at the top of my lungs now. Because there's nowhere to do that in New York City. Like, you're never alone. And if you are alone, you're in like a tiny space and people can hear you everywhere. So it's been a delight to start singing again in my own car. Not when my children are in the car. It's not their favorite. So, whatever. But like when I'm by myself, I get to sing again. It's great.
We heard you might like watching television just a little bit. What are some shows that you've been watching and enjoying lately?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. So there are 2 shows that are currently releasing new episodes that I'm very excited about. And one is The Great North, which is an animated show on Fox. And one is, I wrote this down. Oh, Abbott Elementary. Oh my God. I love that show so much.
That's great.
And I love Abbott because our whole family can watch it together. The Great North is more geared towards adults, or I don't know, maybe some kids watch it, but not my kids yet. But Abbott Elementary is very family friendly. And so we all watch it together, which is so fun. And, beyond that, it's funny because I recently learned that this thing that I do is not just me, which is that I love to rewatch television over and over and over. And it turns out that's a neurodivergent thing as well. Like, I guess a lot of people with neurodivergent brains like to watch things over and over. But I always have, like when I was a kid, we weren't allowed to really watch television. So I had a couple things on VHS tape that I would just watch on repeat. And it's like how I learned storytelling, but also it's a comfort thing. And certainly since the pandemic, I've been like rewatching The Good Place, Parks and Rec, The Office, Schitt's Creek, over and over and over. Those are like my happy places. I'm like, where do I want to visit today? Oh, I'll go to Pawnee, Indiana. I'll go to Scranton. I'll go to The Good Place. I'll go, like it's huge comfort for me. And, there was a time where I thought maybe I wanted to also write for TV, but I have to say, I really love not doing that and writing books, and it's very separate. And in TV, I just get to be a fan. Like, I just get to enjoy it. Now whenever I read a book, I'm thinking, oh, who wrote this? When did they write it? When did this come out? Who published it? Who was the editor? Oh, interesting. It's like the business part of it is really hard to shut down. And when I watch TV, it's this beautiful, like, I don't know, somebody made it. That's great. I mean, I like to find out still who wrote it and give them appropriate credit. But like, I'm able to just be a fangirl and not think about it, like how it got made, which is a treat.
Yes. And I think you're the first author we've interviewed that's also a freelance journalist and essayist.
Oh,
Did I say that right? Essayist. That sounds such a weird. Who writes articles for numerous platforms. Do you have any suggestions on how to be a good journalist or tips on how to start?
I do love that question. I'm really lucky with journalism to have some great role models. My grandfather wrote for the Washington Post, and my dad was a TV reporter for 35 years before he retired in Baltimore. So I grew up seeing examples of journalism. and actually never thought I would follow in their footsteps, and then until I did. But so I think one of the greatest things I learned from watching my dad and from reading my grandfather's work, I never got to meet my grandfather. He died before I was born, but he left behind this legacy of written word. And that was a very cool way for me to get to know him, even though we didn't meet in real life. And so that had a profound effect on me in terms of realizing the power of words and the written word, or like any kind of recorded material, of how it gives you a chance to, again, this idea of like sort of peeking into somebody's brain and seeing what's important to them. And one thing my grandfather was able to do is he wrote editorials for the Washington Post, and he really focused in on things that were important to him. And so one of those things was First Amendment rights. He fought really hard for those through the McCarthy era and a lot of other political eras where First Amendment rights were very much in question. And then another thing he wrote a lot about was gun control. This was back in the 60s and 70s, following the assassinations of Martin Luther King, JFK, RFK. But he just felt so strongly about the need for common sense gun laws, which at the time there weren't any. And his editorials eventually led to President Johnson signing one of the first pieces of legislation about guns.
Wow.
And so through that example is this beautiful illustration of how words are so powerful, and how if you have a platform and you have the opportunity to say something, it should be true, it should be helpful, it should be kind, and it should be thoughtful. Like, you have an ability to say something to a large audience. And I certainly think about this in terms of journalism, but also about the books that I write. My first book was about people who had been affected by gun violence, and, you know, much later trying to move on and, you know, find new meaning in their life and stuff. And it just feels to me that, like, if you have the opportunity to write for people, it should be, you know, all of those things, truthful and honest and thoughtful, but like, you should use that platform to say something important. Now, again, we just talked about the TV that I love. Like, obviously, I think entertainment is important. So it's not like everything has to have a message or a lesson, but I do think it's important to think about your platform. And my advice for people, particularly with journalism, is to sort of like think of it, it's like there are layers. And so you always want to be peeling back the layers and ask the next question, what's underneath that? So, for example, my beat for journalism is that I write about eco-friendly, clean skincare, like environmentally conscious skincare. And it started out as like, oh, lip gloss is fun. But as I sort of peel back the layers and learned more and more about it, I found what part of it really interested me, and also what part of it I thought people weren't talking about enough. And so it turns out, you know, first it was, well, what makes our lipstick, you know, what are the ingredients? And then it's like, oh, some of those ingredients aren't good for humans. Why do we still use those? Wait, some of those ingredients are okay for humans, but they're terrible for the planet. Okay, well, what is this packaged in? And because the beauty industry is responsible for a huge amount of our post-consumer waste. People just throw away, you know, you get like those little sample package, you buy 5 serums, you use half of them, you throw them away. It accrues a ton of waste. And so as I kept peeling back those layers, I was thinking, all right, what questions is nobody else asking? And how do we start these conversations? So I just encourage people who are interested in journalism to keep asking the questions that nobody else is asking, and also just recognize the privilege of having a platform like that. I mean, everybody has a platform today because of social media, but the minute somebody is paying you to be on a platform and allowing you to write from some kind of place of authority, I think it's important to start exercising this idea of like, what am I going to do with the privilege of my platform?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And do you have a writing activity that we can do, or that viewers at home would do? So, and we'll share some links down below.
Yes, absolutely. I'll share a song recommendation that I really like, but my basic recommendation for an activity to go with the color of sound is to try and practice the idea of experiencing music using another one of your senses. So, for example, if you listen to a piece of music and try and sort of not have any visual, turn off your computer screen or look away, just listen to the music and write down what color you think the music is or what shape the music feels like to you. And really tap into that part of your brain that is not used to thinking that way, assuming that whoever is watching this probably doesn't have synesthesia or maybe doesn't have that kind of synesthesia. You can sort of put on that hat for a little while and imagine, okay, so if I were going to see a color, what color is the song? What feeling is it? And I've done this exercise live in some groups already, and it is always so much fun to share afterwards and hear, somebody is like I played this piece of music and to me it's green and it's it's like a give and take kind of apology that I hear in this song is like it's somebody saying, oh, I'm sorry, and then the other person saying, no, I hear it, and it's like the back and forth conversation, and then everybody shares, and somebody was like, oh no, this song is red, it's whatever, and somebody else is like, oh no, all I saw was like blues and yellows, and it was shaped like this, and it's just fascinating. Like there's no right answer, so you can feel whatever you want to feel, and it's cool to hear a good reminder, like everyone else in the room is hearing the same piece of music and experiencing it completely differently.
So true. Are you doing author visits? And do you want to kind of talk about that and why you find them valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing author visits. One of the best things that came out of the pandemic, I mean, looking for silver linings, is that virtual author visits have become more common, and I love doing those because I feel like I can offer them for free because I don't have travel expenses and it doesn't take as much time. And I love getting to meet students. I love sharing books with them. Their questions always inspire me to write new things. Like I want to write the books that kids and the adults who work with them or live with them want to read. I want to like answer their questions or explore the things that they're thinking about. So every time kids ask questions, I'm like, yes, great idea. Yeah. Oh yeah, that should be a book. Like it's very helpful to me. But also I think I'm a writer today because I met a writer when I was a kid. When I was in elementary school, somebody came to my school and was like, hey, I'm a writer. And that was the first time it occurred to me that like the people who write books are just real people who live in real towns and have other real jobs and oftentimes have kids or pets or parents or like whatever, to turn authors into three-dimensional people who are also like flawed humans and do all the normal stuff we have to do, I think is such a gift. Because I always say to kids, if you are seeing me at this author visit, now you've met me and now you know an author, so you can be an author, because you have to see it to know that you can do it. But now you have, like, hi, you know me, we're friends now you can do it too. And I really think, like, of course books vary in their quality and their whatever, but like to a point anyone can be an author. It requires a tremendous amount of hard work and tolerance for rejection, but once you get over those two very small things, everyone has a story to tell, everybody has a point of view, everybody has a world view that is interesting to somebody else or different or whatever. So regardless of how large your audience is, everybody's a storyteller. Everyone has a book in them if they want. Again, they don't have to. It takes a lot of work, but everybody has a story. So I really do love to encourage students and teachers and other parents and whatever to be like, hey, yeah, you can do this too.
It's amazing. You just like described everything. The whole reason we came up with Legit KidLit, and you summed it all up in one nice package. So
well, I mean, it makes sense because I love what you guys do, and it really resonates with me, and it really humanizes the process of writing a book and promoting a book and all of that.
Well, I'm so sad. Like our time is coming to an end. I think like we could talk to you forever.
I'll come back.
We'll just hang out.
Yeah. No, I'd love to come back anytime.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, this has been amazing, and everyone out there needs to buy her book.
Well,
Pre-order now or go out and get it on Monday
Thank you
or
all so
Tuesday.
much. Tuesday or anytime afterwards. I'm so excited and honored to be here, and just, it's so exciting to finally share this story with people. You work on a book for so long and you think about it, and it sort of living inside you, and this beautiful moment when all of a sudden you're passing the story on to other people and being like, okay, now it's yours, is like very exciting and a tiny bit, overwhelming, but all good.
Valid.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
And viewers, there's a lot of way you can support authors that you love. Share this episode, share Emily's books out there, and tell all your friends about it. If you can't buy a copy, tell your library that you would love a copy. Reviews
Yes.
on Amazon and Goodreads and all the things. So yes.
Libraries. I always tell people, I'm like, you don't have to spend a dime to read this book.
Yeah.
You get it at the library. It's just as helpful to me.
Yep.
Yeah. And then more
Amazing.
people get to read it. So
yeah.
Well, to all our readers and viewers, we hope you enjoyed our show and are inspired to pick up a new and amazing book. We'll be back next week with another special guest and plenty of crazy fun. I'm Alexis.
And I'm Tiffany, and we are signing out. See ya.
Bye.
Thank you all so much.